trout fishing in the fall can produce some of the best days of trout fishing throughout the year, but if you're not careful, you can make some mistakes and prevent yourself from getting those big bites, those big trout, and having epic days. So in today's video, we're going to go through the top 10 fall trout fishing mistakes to help you at home avoid these mistakes and hopefully get on some big bites. What is going on, you outdoor mavericks? Welcome back to the channel. Fall trout fishing is one of my favorite times of the year. It produces some really good days of fishing and some epic bites, but you have to be careful because if you make some mistakes, it could cost you a really epic day. And one of the first mistakes that I learned from fall trout fishing was not covering enough water, which is mistake number 10. If you're fishing and not covering water and being able to move around, find different bodies of water, find different pockets of water on a big body of water to find where the trout are, you're doing a disservice and you're only fishing a small section and you're not giving yourself a chance to find the bigger bites and more consistent fish. Now, I've been guilty of this before where I fished the same spot multiple days in a row thinking by the second or third day, hey, this is going to produce a lot of bites like it did on the first day. Well, as it turns out, that was a mistake. I should have covered more water and gone to find where the trout were as they spread out, find food and oxygen sources. So make sure you don't make the mistake of staying in one place. Now make sure to cover a lot of water when you're bank fishing, but also trolling from the boat. And that ties into mistake number 9, which is trolling too deep. Now as you transition from summer to fall trout fishing, the trout may still be deep because of warmer water, so you might need to have your gear in deeper locations. However, if you continue to do that into the fall, you might be missing those trout as they move into shallower water, into the little bit warmer water as there's less sunlight in the day and the water and the weather start to cool down. So don't rely on summer trolling tactics when it comes to fall trout fishing. You need to think opposite, come in closer to the bank, have your gear higher to the top of the water, and use your electronics, because there's been days where you might be 5 or 10 feet off the trout. You're right in the area where they're at, but you're just trolling too deep. Now mistake number 8 is fishing with the same color over and over again. Now I will say this with a caveat, you could probably get away with this in certain situations or bodies of water where one color might be consistent all the time. However, if you're just fishing one color throughout the season, don't expect to have the same results every time out fishing. Now as the weather conditions and the water conditions change, you need to change up the colors of your presentation. Some days the trout might like more natural colors or silvers or golds. Other days they might like brighter colors like pinks and chartreuses and dark bright reds. So you need to pay close attention to the conditions and modify and change your bait colors all the time. Now mistake number 7 is also bait related, which is forgetting to add scent. You gotta add scent. Trout in the fall are super aggressive, and as conditions are changing, you can get some really aggressive and really big bites when you got the right presentation, but you also need the right scent for the food that the trout are eating. So if it's crawdads, night crawlers is a great scent, garlic works in the early part of the fall in warmer weather. You need to make sure you got enough scent. Not only is it going to have your bait stand out amongst the crowd, you need to make sure you got something smelly in there that the trout are going to go after aggressively. So make sure you bring your scent. However, don't spill it all over your hands and expect to come home and not get criticized for why your hands smell like stinky shrimp garlic. Don't ask me how I know. Now mistake number 6 is to not pay attention to the weather and the water. Now if you're fishing the same area over and over again, you may get away with getting a lot of bites because you know the area. You need to pay close attention to different weather patterns, how the water conditions are changing, how the water temp is changing, because that is influencing how the trout are acting. If you're just not paying attention, you could be missing out on some really big and epic bites. But if you're just going out there and using past history and not paying attention, you could be missing out on some really good fall fishing bites. Now mistake number 5 relates back to bait again, and I've done this a lot, which is to use too bright of colors or use bright colors all season instead of changing it up and using natural colors. I've had tendencies in the past of just using bright oranges and pinks, whether it was power bait, power eggs, spinners, and spoons to get the fish's attention. Now that's not to say that the trout won't bite that. However, if you use more natural colors, you may end up getting more bites at the end of the day, especially when it comes to natural colored eggs, which is my favorite fall fishing bait. So don't think when you get to the water, you gotta use bright colors all the time. You gotta change it up, and if using more subtle and natural colors works, you may have found the ticket for an epic day. Now mistake number 4 is a no-brainer. winner, which is not fishing around current and flowing water. Now when it comes to key areas on the body of water where you're going to find the most trout, it's going to be where there's flowing water. There's going to be more food and more oxygen there for the trout. But if you're not fishing in flowing water areas, you're making a huge mistake and giving yourself a disadvantage to try to find some really good trout and some really big bites. One of the things I do when I scout new areas or areas that I'm fishing is to figure out where the flowing water is. Especially in the fall, the trout are going to congregate there and hang out there a lot. So make sure you don't make this mistake or your chance for an epic day of trout fishing may float right past you. Now the number 3 mistake is one of my favorites, and it's something that I've been guilty of before and I've had to coach people on, which is to not fish early or fish at the butt crack of dawn. When it comes to fall trout fishing, sleeping in and fishing when the water warms up more towards the middle of the day and in the afternoon might be more productive for you. Fall is a season of transition, and when the waters start to cool down a lot, the fish will move closer to the bank, but also when that sun gets up in the midday and starts to warm that cooler water up, that's when they'll be more aggressive. So there's no point in showing up to the water at 6, 7 a.m. even in the dark to go fishing, because they might not be biting until 5, 6 hours later. So sleep in and you might have a really good day and you might get lucky. Lucky in catching a lot of trout, that is. Now tip number 2 is a mistake that I constantly make and have to remind myself to make changes on, which is to use too big a bait or too small a bait. When it comes to trout fishing throughout the year, in the fall season in particular, I think making the mistake of having a bait the wrong size can produce some really stinker days, but if you find the right size of bait the trout like, it can produce some of the most epic days on the water. And when it comes to summer to fall transition, we like to use big baits in the summer, so there might be times throughout the season where big baits works, but if you're not getting bites on there, that might be your clue to get smaller baits out there in front of the trout. If you're using too small of a bait, you might not have a big enough bait that the trout want to go after because they're feeding on bigger pieces of bait in the water. So size up a little bit. This is the area where you're gonna have to play around with your bait size and figure out what the trout like. It's really easy to make a mistake and have the wrong size bait. You might have the right color and the right scent, they just don't want to go after it because it's not big enough or not small enough for what they want. Now mistake number 1 is my favorite, which is not going trout fishing in the fall. This is the time of the year for the best bites, the biggest bites, and you can have some of the most epic days on the water. But don't make the mistake of not going trout fishing because it's a little too rainy, it's too cold, there might be a little snow on the ground. So don't sit at home and watch TV. Get out there, grab your rod and reel, and get after some trout. Thank you guys for watching today's video. If you like the information, smash the thumbs up on that video. If you're new to the channel, consider subscribing if you love trout fishing tips, and other outdoor content. And don't forget, and as always you guys, the outdoors is a gift. Share it with others.